today I'm going to be creating some recreations of famous artworks using HueForge and a really wide number of new Panchroma colors. Let me just pause for a second there and tell you very quickly about this piece of software, which is integral to the whole video. You can buy it from shop.thehueforge.com, and the nice thing about this package is that the personal use lifetime account is a one-time purchase, and when you buy it, you'll receive a Polymaker coupon for the exact same amount for use on our web shop if you're in the US or Canada, or with one of our resellers if you're in Europe. So effectively, what you pay for the software, you get back for free in filament. So in the middle here we have our 3D printed HueForge panels. They're split into 6 individual panels. Here we have a Van Gogh, Mona Lisa, and we have a famous one with Marilyn Monroe down there also. So we'll start with the Van Gogh, I think, and this was generated first with an image, and then it transforms it into an STL with very, very small layer heights. And certain colors, when they're printed at a very thin layer height, allow light to pass through. So if you have a blue and a yellow, for example, then you'll get a green color that'll come through as the blue and the yellow are mixing together. And colors like yellow have a very high, what's known as a TD. It's a transmission distance. It's the amount of light that can pass through the color. And then colors like black obviously have a very low TD, so they don't let much light through. So generally, as a rule of thumb, you start with your sort of your darker colors underneath, and then you put your light ones on top, but it's not always like that. And actually there's a real art to creating a nice HueForge file, and I got some help from not only Steve, the creator of HueForge, but also Ian on the HueForge team, who helped me create some of these artworks. So first you start with an image, put that into HueForge, and then you can build up your colors with your different layers. Select everything from the library, with the drop-down library on the left there. We've got all Polymaker colors. We'll have the Panchroma colors in there as well. And then you drag and drop them to build your image. And you get a rough idea of how it's going to look straight away. And then when you're happy with that, you can export it, and then you get the STL. With that comes a document file which tells you which layer heights you need to switch. And I won't get into too much detail, but there's lots of really good tutorials, especially from Steve himself, on how to create a nice HueForge. So this is a famous Van Gogh. You'll notice the bandage around his ear. Famously, after he just cut his ear off, he did this self-portrait. Obviously, not all artworks are in the correct ratio, so this one actually wasn't in the correct ratio. So the first thing that I did was take the image into Photoshop and then just use the generative expand or the generative fill to expand the image downwards. So you see this portion along the bottom here is actually created by AI, and it did a really good job of recreating the brush strokes and making it look like Van Gogh had painted it himself. So now the aspect ratio is 2 to 3, and that's the same for all the artworks, which makes everything very easy with the 3D printed frames and then mounting it on the boards that I've got. So the idea is that we're going to mount the artworks to this MDF board. This is 12mm MDF that I've ripped down, and that's going to give some structure to the artworks. Actually, the prints themselves are really thin, especially where you have dark sections where this is actually like muted purple on top of black. So this area is really thin, and especially in the corner of the Mona Lisa, it needs some backing just to sort of hold everything down, and it'll help us align these edges nicer and create a nicer artwork. So we're going to mount it onto the MDF here. I've got this board here, and then I've designed these frames in our different silk golds. We have the silk gold here. This is actually the champagne gold from the Christmas pack last year, and we have silk rose gold there. And that's just going to slot on, and then we can screw it in from the back here. You see some little screw holes here at the back. So we can screw it in here, and then that's going to hold everything together and also pin down the art. And I'm going to glue the artwork to the board as well. Here with the Van Gogh, so the thing about having multiple panels is obviously we have these seam lines between them, and they're printed very nicely. There's not really much of an elephant's foot going on here. But what Steve suggested was to just rub the panels just gently together. to get a nicer join line. And I think what I'm going to experiment today with is using a soldering iron to just try and just nick the edges together like this, and just try and hide that seam line, just make it disappear. And I'll also hopefully join all the panels together very delicately, which will then help me glue onto the base. So here I have my soldering iron, and we're going to plug that in, and I think just set it to its lowest temperature, which is 180, and it doesn't go any lower than that. So soldering iron on the lowest temperature, let that heat up, and then we're just going to try and really delicately just join these little pieces together. And really just focus on that visible line with the tip of the soldering iron. I've attached all the panels together with the soldering iron. It's quite delicate work. You don't want to go too deep, obviously, because there's colours underneath there that you're messing with. And what I found helps or works quite well is just to sort of go along with the Vincent's brush strokes here. So that kind of helps to blend it in, and try and be a little bit random. They're not completely invisible, but it is much better now. And the good part is it's completely one piece now. Okay, so it is attached, but very, very delicately and only really on the surface. So I think what I want to do is get the glue on the back of this one to really let it soak into the layers. So I think I'm going to flip it over, and I think I'll use the omelette technique by placing another board on top and then flipping the whole thing together. So to glue it, I'm just going to use, this is just wood glue, PVA. It's not the best glue for PLA, but it is a great glue for wood. And what it's going to do is just soak in and just give it a nice hold. And it's also going to give me a lot of time to play around with. Maybe I'll leave a little bit, one area dry on the corners, just to put some dab of super glue, just to help hold it while the PVA glue is setting. So now it's using the boards roughly as a marker. Push that down. Okay, give it a nice squeeze. Flip it over. We'll remove this board. Very nice, and it has taken, glued down quite nicely there. Actually, maybe I don't even need the super glue. So, there we go. One mounted Van Gogh. So now the next thing to do, first I just need to tidy up the edges of my frame, and then the framework is just going to slot on around here. And if I've designed it right, it should just have a little lip that goes over the edge of the artwork here with a nice little offset. And that'll go all the way around. I'm going to screw that in from the back. So these have been printed, I think this was printed with 0.8mm nozzle at a 0.24mm layer height. So the detail's quite nice. Actually, I designed this with as many Panchroma logos as I could possibly fit onto there, trying to recreate the style of a sort of fancy frame that you would see in an art gallery. Which one goes next to each other, because they've all just come straight off the print bed. So the corners are obviously together. I'll put them over here. One side here was touching the bed, very flat of course. This side, just a little bit of over extrusion, so I'm just going to take the electric sander here, just give it a quick little pulse. Just to take those high points off, and that'll just give me a better join line when I butt these pieces together and make everything a little bit neater. So I'm just using this little handheld fan to blow away the dust here. I just picked this thing up recently. They've become quite popular right now. A great little tool to have around your 3D printer, or if you're doing any work or anything that involves dust. What was really nice about this when I bought it, it came with actually 2 3D printed parts. So really nice to see 3D printing finally making its way into end-use production. Okay, so now I'm just going to try and match all these parts so I know where they go, and the Panchroma logos on the outside should help me do that. That was a little bit trickier than I expected actually. I'm glad this logo is on all 3 sides, because some of them do kind of match up and you think you've got it, but then there's one on the back which doesn't line up, so worth just checking all 3 sides. Now I can bring the artwork back in. Vincent? Oh, yeah, I remembered. I did put one Polymaker logo, and that one goes at the bottom. So the whole thing is upside down. So first, just get that on. They're all on. It looks quite nice. First time to see it actually with the frame, and I must say, it really looks amazing. Really happy with how this has come out. So I've got a little test piece here, and I've just figured out my clutch settings. Definitely don't use an impact driver on the screws here, it'll just split them instantly. So instead use drill driver with a clutch. I've got my clutch set to 4, which is quite a nice tension for these screws without splitting the 3D printed part. So I'll get some wire, wrap it around there, make a nice hook, and there is a little recess here on the frame, so it will sit flush against the wall, which is just gives it that extra finishing touch, I think. So there he is. Vincent van Gogh HueForge, done on a P1S with Panchroma filaments. The next job was to finish off the Mona Lisa, get that framed up, and then the Marilyn Monroe, which was much easier as it didn't need joining as the artwork was already in 6 panels. Got these artworks packed and wrapped, and then on the road to Frankfurt, where we plan to display them at the Formnext exhibition, which is the world's largest additive manufacturing show. For a few finishing touches, I ordered some decorative wall lamps and some plaques in the style of something you'd expect from an art gallery to recreate that feeling and bring the artworks to life. The response at the show was overwhelming, and it turned out to be a real eye-catcher for the booth, with many visitors keenly intrigued, getting up close and personal, taking photos and feeling the subtle texture of the artworks. After a successful show, the next one on the calendar was a trip to the UK for the Sanjay Mortimer RepRap Festival, and we thought it would be a nice idea to auction the paintings at the show, with all proceeds going to the Sanjay Mortimer Foundation. I set the artworks up on some easels next to our stand and put a reserve price of £175 for each painting, purely because they were made with 1.75 filament and it sounded like a good price. I thought that if they go for around £200 a piece, and that would be fantastic help for the foundation, who specialise in helping neurodivergent minds realise their potential in STEM fields. After a great show, I checked back in on the paintings and the online auction and was quite surprised to see the Marilyn Monroe going for nearly £1,000, which is clearly the most popular of the 3 artworks, and for me, the easiest one to make. In total, after the auction closed, the 3 artworks had raised £1,595, with the Marilyn Monroe selling for £925, the Mona Lisa going for £280, and my favourite, the Van Gogh, selling for £390. The files for all the artworks and the frames are in the video description below, along with a list of Panchroma filaments needed to recreate them. Finally, I'll end this video with a word from Teal Bradshaw, the CEO of Smurf.
Okay, just wanted to do a massive shout out to Polymaker, especially Luke, for donating 3 incredible pieces of artwork. They have raised a ton of money for the Sanjay Mortimer Foundation, and we're just so excited that you're supporting us. So thank you Polymaker, thank you Luke.